The French Bakery, written by Ren Bryant, read by the author. If I could go back in time, I'd never visit that ancient village near a small lake in Charbonne, France. We weren't even supposed to be there. We stumbled upon the town as we were driving the back roads to Lyon, summer 1989. I had gotten a big bonus that year and we decided to splurge on a camping vacation through France. I'd been working crazy hours and missed connecting with my family. All that time on business trips made me feel like a deadbeat dad. So I was hoping the trip would allow us to reconnect. I also thought about my kids, Becky and Jeremy, aged 8 and 12, and thought they could learn something about other cultures with the trip. And they did. Up until that point, France was a beautiful place. We really enjoyed spending time together, getting reacquainted. We took in the sights and sounds in city after city, even enjoying the escargot. Well, I enjoyed the escargot. The rest of the family wouldn't touch it. As we wound our way through the mountains of the Auvergne region, storm clouds gathered in the sky. With each bending corner, more daylight became consumed by darkness. I turned on the car's lights and wipers as big globs of rain pelted our windshield. The rain was so intense I had to slow down, dropping my speed to a near crawl. The roads quickly became flooded and I wasn't sure my rented Renault was going to make it through the storm. Rain drummed our window. Visibility was near zero. My kids said they were scared. They didn't like driving the mountain roads as it was, always scared we would fall off the edge and tumble down the mountainside. We puttered into a small village. I stopped on the side of the road. My wife Emma looked at a map, trying to figure out our exact location. It was raining so hard we missed the sign for the village. She was lost. I was too. The village was tiny and absolutely ancient looking, the most medieval place I'd ever seen, something out of a grim fairy tale. All the buildings were made with blackened stone. The houses were so small we wondered whether people lived in them. At the center of the village was a blackened stone church. A graveyard grew out of the forest across the street, going up the mountain slope, giving crypts a view over the entire town. There were only 2 or 3 streets in the entire place. Maybe it was the stormy skies overhead, but the village seemed darker than the others in France. There were no cars, no people either, though with the storm it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. I cranked my head skyward. It looked like the storm would be sticking around for a while. "Look, a bakery," my wife said. "Dad, I'm hungry," my son Jeremy said. He was always hungry and hadn't found a French bakery he didn't like. "Me too," said Becky. My wife looked at me. "It's nearly dinner time, Paul," she said. By dinner time, Emma meant American dinner time, not French dinner time. Though he had been in France for more than a week already, we couldn't get used to eating as late as the French did. "Who's running through the rain?" I said. "I mean, the bread would be soggy." "We can all go," Emma said with a smile. "Family adventure." We didn't have any umbrellas with us, so Emma distributed extra maps to the kids to put over their head. We ran as fast as we could to the bakery, doing our best to dodge the puddles. Dodging didn't help much. Neither did the map umbrellas. We were all soaked as we burst through the door. The tiny bell on the door frame dinged as we entered, but there was no one inside. Not at the counter anyways. The bakery looked like your typical French joint. A tiny place with different styles of baguette along the back wall, divided by baskets. Handwritten labels indicated which was which. They all looked the same to me. In the display case next to the counter were a few pain au chocolats, some croissants, and a couple of delicious-looking tarts. Next to those were a selection of fresh, ready-made sandwiches, butter and ham or butter and salami. As we drooled over the selection, Becky tugged on my sleeve. When I looked down at her, she nodded her head and pointed with her chin towards the back corner. There was a door cracked open a few inches. It was dark on the other side, but then I saw them. Eyes looking at us. They moved from Emma to Jeremy to Emma, and finally myself, giving us the once-over. Jeremy and Emma didn't notice. They were too focused on food. "Bonjour," I called out. The crack of thunder made us all jump. The eyes disappeared into the blackness behind the door. "Hello, bonjour." The door creaked open and an old woman wearing an apron came from the back. She had a slightly hunched back and wore her hair in curlers. She looked as ancient as the buildings of the village. "Bonjour," she said. She said some other stuff too, but not speaking French, I didn't understand. Je mange, I said, as I brought my hand to my mouth, making eating motions. I'm not sure I had the lingo down, but I think she got the message. She looked at us with a crooked neck and scratched her chin. The look said she didn't get many foreigners around these parts. "Du sandwich jambon," I said slowly, trying my best not to mangle the few words I knew, trying my best to be understood. "Du sandwich salami, du pain au chocolat." Becky tugged on my arm again and motioned to the door. The eyes were back. "Dad, I want a tart too," Jeremy said in his whiny preteen way. The back door creaked open again. The eyes became a man, an old man, as ancient as the woman grabbing our sandwiches. I assumed he was the husband. He wore a faded blue button-up shirt and gray trousers that seemed 2 sizes too big. They were held up by comically large suspenders that made his shoulders look small and bony. The man's face was lined with wrinkles. He looked like a raisin. As he looked all of us over, we looked at each other. Emma gave me a look that said, "This is weird." Becky grabbed my arm tight. I heard Jeremy quietly say, "That guy's creepy." The man didn't say anything to us, just looked at us and smiled. The smile gave his face even more wrinkles. As the woman bagged our order, the man slowly walked from behind the counter and bent down next to me and my daughter. With a weak voice, he said something in French I didn't understand and pinched Becky's cheek, causing her to shrivel into my leg. "Yeah, definitely creepy," I heard Jeremy say. Emma paid and we left the bakery, running back to the car through the rain as fast as we could. I looked back over my shoulder and I saw the man in the window looking at us, waving, still smiling. We ate in the car and tried to figure out our next steps. The kids kept talking about the old man, how weird he was, but I ignored them. Yeah, he was spooky and creepy and everything else, but I didn't want to validate their fears. The whole town seemed creepy if you want to know the truth. The blackness of the stone used in the construction, the tiny houses with their dilapidated shutters. It was a dying town if I ever saw one, and those two in the bakery confirmed that notion. I wanted to get to Lyon, but the rain wasn't letting up. The roads all seemed flooded at this point. And if it was this bad in town, I figured the mountain roads would be even worse. "I don't think we have a choice," I said. "We probably need to hole up here for the night and head out in the morning after the storm passes. I think it's the safest plan. I don't want to be driving in these mountain roads in an unfamiliar environment." I left the kids and my wife in the car and ran through the town looking for a motel. Given we've only seen a church and some tiny houses, I wasn't expecting much. Though there was a bakery, so maybe there'd also be a place to stay. I ran as fast as I could through the rain, looking at all the buildings. Every inch of my clothing was soaking and I was chilled to the bone. I didn't see anything that indicated a place to stay, so I ran back to the car. As I got closer, I saw the man from the bakery standing outside our Renault, looking through the passenger side window at Emma. He wasn't wearing a rain jacket, hat, or any protection, just those trousers and suspenders. "Hey!" I yelled. I didn't think he heard me over the thunder and rain, but I shouted again anyways. "Hey! What are you doing?" The old man gave me a bad feeling in the bakery, and now I had a knot in my gut. Though he was older than dirt, I was scared. I didn't know what he was doing out in the rain next to my car, next to my family. I ran as fast as I could, sending splashes every which way. "Hey, you!" I yelled as I ran. "What are you doing?" I saw the man pointing to something, towards the town. I didn't know exactly what. As I got nearer to the car, he looked at me. "Old man, what are you doing out here?" I said. This time he heard me and turned his head sideways. He didn't respond, only smiled that creepy, toothless smile. I opened my driver's side door and jumped in the car, sending water everywhere. "Emma, kids, are you okay? What's going on?" I said. I whipped my head around the car looking at my family. Water flicked off my hair like a dog shaking dry. The kids were hugging each other in the back seat, scared. The old man continued to point. We could barely see him through the water pelting the windows. Emma said, "I think it's okay. He's a weird one, but I think he means well. I think I heard him say chambre. Isn't that French for chambers, as in like a room, a place to stay?" I leaned over Emma to roll down the passenger side window. Rain whipped through the car and into our faces. "Hey, mister," I said. "Are you saying there's a place to stay?" No response, only that smile, only pointing with his bony, wrinkled finger. His wet clothes clung to his body and exposed the shriveled frame that went with his face. "Chambre?" I said, doing my best French. "Oui, chambre," he said finally before motioning again with his hand and going back to his smile. I rolled up the window and looked at Emma and then the kids, asking what do you think with my eyes. "We don't have many options," Emma said. The kids immediately protested. "Not with that creepy man," Jeremy said. "Yeah, he's so old," Becky added. "Kids, please," Emma responded. "It's really coming down out there. We need a place to stay. Just for the night. Just until the storm passes and we can get to Lyon tomorrow." I rolled down the car window again and said, "Okay, chambre." After we requested the room, the old man's grin appeared to be even bigger. He pointed again to a house behind him and then he walked away, back towards the bakery. We gathered our things as best we could in the small Renault and headed towards the house the man pointed to. Like the other buildings, it was a tiny place built with black stone. The yellow shutters hung slightly askew and needed new paint. Smoke puffed from the chimney indicating somebody was inside. I ran past it when I was looking for a place to stay but didn't see any signs indicating rooms available. We knocked and huddled together, trying to shield the kids from the torrent from heaven as best as possible. After a minute, the door opened. "Oui?" said a man with a plaid vest and a pipe in his mouth. He was a portly man, his fat face framed by a gray beard and round-rimmed glasses. He was old, but not nearly as old as the man in the bakery. "Hi, chambre?" I said. "We'd like a room." "A room?" he said. I was surprised he spoke English. Yes, come in." The inside of the home was as dark as the outside. A glow from the fireplace bounced off the black stone walls, casting eerie shadows. A faded tapestry of a fox hunt hung on the wall. A heavy oak armoire stood in the hallway next to the worn wooden stairs. I looked down at the puddle of water under our feet. "I'm sorry we're so wet. We were told you have a room?" "My English," the man said, and then made a waving motion with his hand. So. "Room, yes, come." He escorted us upstairs where we passed dusty picture frames of black and white photographs. Portrait of men in suits and top hats and women in lace gowns holding dainty umbrellas. "Here," he said as he opened up the first door on the right. Then he said, "Children here," and opened up the room across the hallway on the left. Emma and I looked at each other. "No," she said, "we need one room." The man didn't say anything, just shook his head no as if he didn't understand. I shrugged and looked in our room. Black stone walls gave it a closed-in, claustrophobic look. It was tiny, like the entire house. 2 single beds, they almost looked like doll beds, were close together. A small oak dresser with a mirror was pushed against the wall next to the window. "Oh, a room for 2, I said to Emma. She looked in and understood. We needed 2 rooms if we were going to fit. I walked the kids into the room across the hall. It looked the same as ours. Black stone walls, 2 tiny beds, and a dresser. "Daddy, I want to stay with you," Becky said. She didn't look happy with the accommodations. The man interrupted and said, "Salle de bain." He pointed to the door at the end of the hall. "Bathroom." I understood. "Listen, kids," I said. "It's one night. Tomorrow we go to Lyon. Your mom and I are just across the hall if you need us. Becky, Jeremy will be here, right with you, right next to you, in fact." "Don't worry, I'll protect you," Jeremy said, sensing his sister's unease. That night I had a terrible time trying to get to sleep. I don't know if it was the tiny doll bed, the lumpy mattress, or the fact that I felt like I was coming down with a cold from running in the rain. Whatever it was, I had a feverish dream. In the dark, I saw those eyes, those wrinkled old man eyes staring at me. I felt his breath on my skin. It was dank and cancerous. I saw him opening a door, a heavy wooden door that looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then he smiled at me. That creepy, toothless smile. His mouth extended ear to ear as his face smushed together. One big wrinkle like a Shar-Pei. I woke with a start. I was wet with sweat. My shirt clung to my back as I sat up. I felt my heart racing in my chest as I looked around the dark room trying to get my bearings. Emily was snoring. I guess I was the only one with sleep issues. I was troubled by my dream, enough that I wanted to splash water on my face. I quietly got up to head to the bathroom, doing my best to tiptoe so the old wooden floors wouldn't creak. It was so dark I had to hold out my hands in front of me so I didn't crash into anything. When I got to the hallway, I noticed the kid's bedroom door was open. The door from my dream. That's why it seemed familiar. It was the door in the house. My heart started beating fast again. Floor squeaks be damned, I quickly entered the kid's room. I could barely see. Only a glint of moonlight from the window provided my light. Jeremy was breathing heavily in deep sleep. I didn't hear Becky, however. I reached out towards her bed and felt the frame. I moved my hands up towards her mattress and felt around. Nothing. There was nothing. "Becky!" I whispered. I stabbed my hands in the dark, searching up and down the bed, searching for a leg, a toe, a head, a hand, anything. "Becky!" This time louder. "Becky! Baby!" The bed was empty. There was no response either. "Becky! Becky!" I hear Jeremy wake up. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Jeremy, where's your sister?" I said without looking at his direction, still searching the bed for Becky. "Sleeping," he said. "She went to sleep last I saw of her. Why?" "She's not here," I said. Jeremy jumps up and switches on the light switch. It confirms that Becky isn't here. I race down the hall to the bathroom. She's not there either. I yell out her name, loud enough to wake Emma. We all race through the house together, screaming Becky's name. She was nowhere to be found. The proprietor came out of his room with sleepy eyes, wearing a long nightshirt like he was Ebenezer Scrooge. He said some stuff in French I don't understand. I explained my daughter is missing, though I'm not sure he fully gets what I'm saying. But I think he could read the angst on my face and seems to get it. "Maison fermée," he said. He escorts me downstairs and pulls on the front doorknob, showing me it's locked. "But where's Becky?" I asked. He doesn't understand. "My daughter, damn it! Where's my daughter?" I grabbed his shirt and shook him. The man recoiled as if I committed a grave offense. "Maison fermée," he said again. "I do not know." Emma, Jeremy, and I searched the entire place. We yelled, we overturned furniture, we checked everywhere, even outside. The rain had stopped at this point, but the ground was soaking wet. Puddles were everywhere. Becky was nowhere to be found, not even tracks in the mud. Emma broke down in tears. That caused Jeremy to lose it as well. They were scared. I did my best to comfort them, but I was scared too. I had to hold back tears myself. I thought back to my dream, the eyes, the grin, the old man at the bakery. Maybe he had something to do with this. He was the only other person who knew we were here. I didn't want to tell Emma or Jeremy about my dream, though. I didn't want them to worry more. But I had to ask the innkeeper. "The man," I said. "Home. The old man from the bakery, the boulanger." The man shook his head. "Boulanger? No, no boulanger. Fermé." No one slept the rest of the night. The innkeeper brewed some coffee and we sat around the table, praying, hoping Becky would return. We alternated shifts outside, yelling Becky's name and walking around the block. With only the crescent of the moon, we couldn't see much. Nothing but black skies, black buildings, and black puddles. When the morning came, I decided to pay a visit to the bakery while Emma and Jeremy searched the rest of the village. I walked over to the bakery, but it wasn't there. There was a house, a building, the same as we saw yesterday, but now the window was boarded up. The shutters were rusty and hanging askew. There were no signs for a bakery. There was nothing but a dilapidated, abandoned house. I found the innkeeper. "The boulanger," I said. "What happened to the boulanger? It was there yesterday." Again, he looked at me, not understanding completely. "No boulanger. Fermé." Now it was me not understanding. "The bakery. It was there yesterday. We walked inside. We saw an old man and an old woman. We bought sandwiches. We ate. It's that house there." I pointed. "It was there yesterday. It was." The man shook his head. "Fermé." I asked the man in charge of the house about the police. That he understood. "Gendarmerie," he said. I wasn't exactly sure what that was, but I thought it was like the French National Guard or Highway Patrol or something. I thought I saw some cars with those words on it as we drove. Not like there was a police station in this tiny village anyways, so I guess they would have to do. Emma and Jeremy came back from their search. They found nothing. No people, no sign of Becky. I told Emma about the bakery and she started freaking out, asking the innkeeper the same things I did. "No use," I told her. "He only said the bakery is closed. I don't think he understands." Emma collapsed into my chest and I hugged her tight. We were living a nightmare. I asked the old man if he had a phone. "Telephone," I said slowly. Oui, téléphone," he said. Please call the police, s'il vous plaît." We patrolled the entire village again. We knocked on doors, checked everywhere. No one answered and there were no signs of Becky. I took Emma and Jeremy to the bakery and they were as puzzled as me. We tried to break inside, but it was no use. I again asked the innkeeper about the bakery and the old couple who owned the place, but he looked at me strange. "Man," he said. "There is no man." "There was a man!" Emily stomped her feet as she yelled. "There was an old man with a wrinkled face and a smile, a creepy smile. He was the one who told us about your rooms." Jeremy looked worried as his mom's voice grew with anger. The innkeeper again shrugged. "No man," he said. The cop or inspector or whatever showed up. He was young. His English was slightly better than the innkeeper. Not great, but we could communicate better. In his broken English, he said the same thing as the dispatcher on the phone. He said she's probably around town, to wait and see if she'll turn up. "They always do," he said. I told him about the bakery. I said we ordered sandwiches and he told us about the room at the inn, and that's why we stayed at the village. He looked at me puzzled and said there was no bakery in this town. He said there hadn't been a bakery in town for close to 20 years. He said something happened, but he didn't have the details. "Before my time," he said. The cop then spoke to the innkeeper in French. They went back and forth for a while. I'm not sure what was said. I heard a couple of familiar words, things like maison fermée and boulanger. There seemed to be some disagreement, but then maybe not. I found a lot of French conversation to sound like arguing. The innkeeper was shaking his head a lot, though. The inspector said there wasn't much else he could do. He would keep an eye out, patrol the area. He gave us his phone number and left. It felt like we were back where we started. Emma was frantic and said we needed to call somebody who would listen. The U.S. Embassy, she said. We looked on our passports for a number and got a hold of them after a few attempts. They weren't much better than the gendarmerie. They took our information down, said to remain vigilant, and they would reach out to local authorities on our behalf. We waited all day in the village. There wasn't a soul in sight. No one except for the innkeeper. We asked about staying another night, but he said those familiar words, Maison fermée. We seemed to be out of luck. We waited in the car and figured out our next steps. When I planned the trip, I thought about getting closer as a family, but this was not what I had in mind. We were a wreck. Emotionally, we were spent. Physically, we were exhausted. This was possibly the worst thing that could ever happen to a parent. Not just losing a child, but losing a child in a foreign land. We were helpless. We talked it over and tried to figure out what could have happened to Becky. We tried to figure out what was the deal with the bakery and whether we were all going crazy. We had no answers. Nothing made sense. The old man, the bakery, it didn't seem to exist. Just like Becky, poof, gone. I told Emma about my dream. She wasn't mad at me for withholding the information, but it gave her goosebumps. She said she read about that stuff, that premonition stuff, but she didn't think it was real. We decided to sleep in the car that evening. It wasn't comfortable and we barely slept, but there was no way in hell we were leaving. We had to wait and see if Becky turned up. The next day was the same as the previous one. No Becky, no one in town. Even the innkeeper was out. We knocked, but he didn't answer the door. I called the embassy again and got nowhere. Each morning we searched the village and surrounding areas. Each afternoon I called the gendarmerie and embassy and tried to get answers. After 2 weeks we were out of time and out of money. We couldn't stay any longer. Emma and I cried something terrible the night we had to leave. Jeremy too. We knew the statistics. If we couldn't locate Becky by now, chances are we would never find her. We felt like we were abandoning our baby. We didn't want to leave. We would have lived out of our car for the rest of our lives in that village if we could. But we didn't have a choice. Jeremy had school. We had work. Still, leaving without Becky was a punch to the gut. The kind you don't recover from. The kind that feels like the ultimate abandonment. For the next 9 years, Emma and I took turns visiting that village in France. We would search for a week, sleeping in the rental car and knocking on doors. The town never changed. The same half-abandoned black stone buildings, the same darkness and isolation. We never saw the innkeeper again. We never saw people, actually, not on any visit. Nor a bakery, nor an old man with a toothless grin, and no Becky, not even a hint of her. We did our best to come to grips with Becky's disappearance, but there was always a massive hole in our heart. The authorities never had any answers, neither the gendarmerie nor the embassy. Today would have been Becky's 18th birthday. I told Emma I needed to visit one last time. I knew I wouldn't find anything, not after 10 years, but I needed to say goodbye. I needed to be at peace with things, or at least try to be anyways. I flew into Lyon and rented a small Peugeot. Winding my way up the mountains of Auvergne, storm clouds gathered overhead. It brought back memories of our trip all those years ago. I put my foot on the brake, going from 90 kilometers down to 50 as I approached a sharp turn. I looked to my left and saw a graveyard climbing the mountainside into the forest. Crypts with million-dollar views of a medieval black stone church and similar tiny houses. It was Charbon, the village. I had arrived. The rain started coming down in buckets, just like the first day we arrived. The wind picked up and I fought the wheel of my Peugeot as it dipped to the shoulder. I checked my mirrors, no one around. I put my foot on the brake and came to a stop and let out a big sigh. Saying goodbye was going to be harder than I thought. As I drove slowly into the village, I thought about how this place never changes. How many centuries has it stood and looked the same as it did now? I thought about Becky and how she looked the day she went missing. How her beautiful 8-year-old face looked. In my mind, she hadn't aged. I parked the car in the same spot we parked in on that fateful day and checked my mirrors again. this time staring at my face. Pain and loss have a way of prematurely aging people. My black hair was now gray, and heavy lines radiated from the corners of my eyes. I wondered if Becky would recognize me. The rain continued coming down in sheets. The inside of my windows fogged up. As I rubbed the windshield with my elbow, I saw him. The old man with the wrinkles and the smile. I could recognize him anywhere. "What the hell?" I said. I shook my head and closed my eyes, taking a few deep breaths. When I opened them, I saw him again. It was him. The same suspenders, the same Shar-Pei face, the same toothless smile. I leaned forward, my breath fogging up the windshield again. I rubbed it clear and could see he was motioning with his arm, beckoning me. I felt like I was in a daze. It couldn't have been real. I got out of the car robotically, not bothering with a rain jacket or umbrella. I didn't even close the door. My hair quickly became matted from the rain. My clothes soaked through to my skin. He smiled, big, ear to ear, just like I remember from before. He continued his hand motions. I walked towards him. I wanted to run, but I wasn't quite sure I believed what I saw before me. The rain pelted my face, making me squint. Then I saw it. The Boulanger. The sign was clearly visible, even through the rain. It was the same building, the same as before. But there was no board on the window. Inside, the lights were on. Red was on the back wall. The man walked towards the bakery, still smiling, still motioning me to join him. I picked up my pace. It had to be real. It had to be. This was not a dream. He opened the door and walked inside, and I followed. A tiny bell announced our arrival. As I entered, the smell of fresh bread wafted through my nostrils. It looked exactly the same. All sorts of baguettes, sorted with handwritten cards, pain au chocolat, croissants, tarts, sandwiches. I rubbed my eyes. I couldn't believe it. When I opened them, I saw her. The old woman coming from the back. Behind her was Becky, her arms holding a sheet of baked goods. She hadn't aged a day since she went missing. She put the tray down and stood behind the counter looking at me. "Monsieur, qu'allez-vous avoir?" She didn't recognize me.